October 22nd, 2016, and we will start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so last week we started our program on the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses of the Buddha, taking the first collection or compilation, the Book of the Ones, which I've broken up into certain sections, and the first section is the section of very short suttas dealing with the mind, and the operative word here representing mind is citta. And I want to look a little bit more at this concept of citta, taking a few texts outside the Anguttara Nikaya, which shed some light on, we call it the functional meaning of citta in the Buddha's teaching. So first I've taken some verses, or actually it's a chapter in the Dhammapada, which is called appropriately the Citta Vagga, which is the chapter on the citta, on the mind. So just from these verses you could see how the word citta functions, in contrast with the other words representing mental activity in early Buddhism, mano, which can almost in some context be substituted for citta, and the word vijnana, which is normally translated consciousness, which would be generally used in very different ways. So for example, we have here, just as an arrow maker straightens an arrow shaft, even so the discerning man, and here I'm taking this as from a 1960s translation, so the translator, an Indian monk, still is imbued in the way of thinking of that period. Now we would say a discerning person straightens his or her mind, so fickle and unsteady, so difficult to guard. Okay, but the important word here is the mind, which is citta. So it's the mind which is fickle and unsteady, difficult to guard, which you might have experienced just an hour ago when sitting down for meditation. Okay, and just as a fish, when pulled out of water and cast on land, throbs and quivers, so is this mind. This mind throbs and quivers. Okay, wonderful is it to subdue the mind, so difficult to subdue. Ever swift, the mind is swiftly moving. Just as one of the suttas here says that nothing changes so quickly as the mind, and it seizes whatever it desires. The mind, the citta, usually moves in the grip of desire, grasping this, grasping that. A tamed mind, it's a tamed citta, brings happiness. Again, let the discerning man guard the mind, the citta, which is difficult to detect. So if we're not careful, if we don't have mindfulness and clear comprehension or mindfulness and inner discernment, the mind can play very terrible tricks on us. You know, we want to keep the mind clear and calm, but the mind is running here and there. The mind is always constantly undermining our own well-being. So the mind is difficult to detect in an extremely subtle seizing. Again, it seizes whatever it desires. And so a guarded citta brings happiness. And then this verse says, dwelling in the cave. Then the translator says, this follows the commentary, that the cave is the heart. So dwelling in the cave of the heart, the mind without form, because the mind is not material, it's not without any material substance, wanders far and alone. So this is referring to the ancient Indian physiology, that sort of the physical base of the mind is considered to be the heart, not necessarily the physical heart, but a kind of very subtle substance which is in some relationship to the physical heart. And of course the mind is without any physical form, it has no color, no shape, no substance, and it wanders far. Think of China, think of India, think of Rwanda, you're there. Think of Mars, think of Jupiter, think of Uranus, you're there. Think of what's the next galaxy? Andromeda, you're there. And it wanders alone. You might imagine you're going with your friends, but really the mind goes alone. And those who subdue this citta are liberated from the bonds of Mara. So Mara is what gets control of the citta. Get away. Get out of here. That's the only thing that's going to accompany your citta is an advertisement for Dell auxiliaries. So those who subdue this citta, so that which binds the mind, the citta, is Mara, and when one overcomes the kilesas, the defilements, then one is liberated from the bonds of Mara. And then whatever an enemy may do to an enemy, a hater to a hater, an ill-directed citta can do greater harm to oneself. And then neither one's mother, nor father, nor any other relative can do greater good to oneself, but a well-directed citta can do greater good. Okay, so these are just some verses from the Dhammapada which show how citta, operates within the Buddha's teaching. So generally, one wouldn't find vijnana, consciousness, functioning in that role, and generally not mano, though occasionally one can see mano in that role, since mano is one of the three doors of action, along with body and speech. And then this is an interesting sutta that occurred to me. And it depends on certain puns or word plays that are possible in Pali. You see, in the suttas, often the Buddha plays with words to bring out the meaning of concepts. And here we have a certain word play which brings out deep aspects of the citta, or deep implications of the role or function of citta. So it begins with a simile. So we have a dog tied on a leash, and the leash is bound to a strong post. And so if it walks, the dog walks close to the post. If it stands, it's down, lies down, it's always close to that post. And so the uninstructed worldling, he regards the five aggregates: form, feeling, perception, volitions, consciousness. This I am, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. So whatever he does, because of his taking the five aggregates to be myself, he's always tied down or bound down to those five aggregates. Okay, that's not the passage that I want. It's the passage that comes here, that begins here. So then the Buddha says, therefore, one should often reflect upon one's own mind, one's own citta thus. For a long time, this mind, this citta, has been defiled by lust, hatred, and delusion. So this cittang has been sankilititang, that's defiled by lust, raga, hatred, dosa, moha. So it is through the defilements of the mind, citta sankilesa, that beings are defiled, and it is with the cleansing of the mind that beings are purified. Okay, here comes the wordplay or the pun. So now the Buddha says, have you seen the picture called faring on? The reference is a little obscure, but I think that there must have been someplace near Savatthi, a picture exhibition was set up, like an art exhibition, with a big, in fact this is what the commentary explains, a big picture illustrating all the different realms of existence, so that everybody could see all of the heavens and the hell realms and the ghostly realms. And now the word for a picture, an art picture in Pali, is, by an interesting coincidence, is also citta. But that word citta has nothing to do with the word citta meaning mind. And in Sanskrit, the word meaning picture would be chitra. But in Pali, the TR combination would not stand, but or it's very rare. Usually the TR combination turns into a double T because it's easier to pronounce. If you try to say chitra, it's a little bit unnatural. So it's much easier to say citta. And so the word chitra, meaning picture, in Pali turns into citta. And so the Buddha says, have you seen the picture called charana? Charana means wandering or faring on. So the monks say, yes, Bhante. So the Buddha says, even that picture called faring on has been designed by the mind. It's so difficult to render that into English, but if you look at the Pali, tampi chitang, that picture called nama, named charana, wandering, has been designed, chititang, or painted, chitane eva, by the mind itself. But the mind is even more diverse, Chitang Yeva, even more diverse than that picture called the faring on. Therefore, one should often reflect on one's own mind thus. And then it repeats that one's mind has often been defiled by lust, hate, and delusion, and through the defilements of the mind, beings are defiled. With the cleansing of the mind, beings are defiled. Okay, then the next statement, the Buddha says, I do not see any other order of living beings so diversified, and here the word diversified is chitang, which again, it's a word play. It's not directly related etymologically to the word chitta, meaning mind. So I do not see any other order of living beings so diversified as the animal realm. But even those beings in the animal realm have been diversified by the mind. Yet the mind is even more diverse than those beings in the animal realm. And the way the commentary explains that, we take all of the beings in the animal realm. We could take like the worms, the insects, the fish, the birds, the mammals, the rodents. Why do all of those beings exist in that diversity? All of those beings exist in that diversity. It's reflecting the karma of living beings. Like that outer diversity is reflecting karma. Karma manifests in the diversity of the animal realm. Not only the animal realm, but all sentient beings. And where does that karma come from? Comes from the mind. So the diversity, or chitang, the diversity, chitang of the chitta, of the mind, gets sort of reflected outwardly in the diversity of the different types of sentient beings. Okay, from that we can come back into our chapter in the Anguttara Nikaya. And looking at the suttas that I blocked off as the chapter or the section which I call the section on the topic of the mind, the two that I would say form properly, that I would take as forming the starting point or basis for this chapter, ironically, are the two that come at the end, are suttas 56 and 57, in that these seem to be enunciating the most fundamental principle, which is that whatever qualities are unwholesome partake of the unwholesome and pertain to the unwholesome. All have the citta, mind, as their forerunner. Mind arises first, followed by the unwholesome qualities. And then the counterpart, whatever qualities are wholesome, partake of the wholesome, and pertain to the wholesome, all have mind as their forerunner. Mind arises first, followed by the wholesome qualities. Now this statement, or these two statements, have to be taken sort of in I would say in a qualified sense, or with explanation. Because if we look at the citta from the standpoint of Abhidhamma, or from an analytical standpoint, it's not the case that citta arises first in time, and then sometime later the feeling arises, the volition arises, the perception arises, but rather all of these factors arise together. I think the point that the Buddha is making here is that the citta here is being understood primarily in its intentional role, in that it is the citta as the force of intention that arises. Let's say citta together with cetana that are primarily responsible for generating action. And so the citta arises together with cetana, with volition, and it is from the citta and cetana, from mind together with volition, that there comes verbal and bodily action. And so this shows, that this is the basic sort of program of Buddhist training, that in order to train oneself to behave in a wholesome way, one constantly has to monitor one's states of mind. And then one has to train one's states of mind. So if we Okay, so if somebody's behavior, it's characterized by tendencies towards angry speech and rough, violent action, aggressive action. So if we're going to transform that person's speech, if that person wants to transform their speech and action, then they have to go back to the root, to the starting point, which is looking back into their mind. And so they have to realize that their speech and action is flowing out from the mind. And therefore they have to monitor their own mind, check the mind, and change the mind by becoming mindful of how these rough, angry states of mind are arising and then manifesting in their speech. Well, first manifesting in their attitudes, their thoughts, and then spilling out from their thoughts into their words and their, even before their actions, but in their posture, their way of moving, their deportment, and then into their behavior. And so by changing the citta, the mind, then when the mind is changed, then naturally it will manifest in pleasant and polite speech and in kind, gentle action. Anything wrong in that? No? Correct? Okay, so these two suttas I would call starting point of the section. And now what's interesting to observe these three suttas, I was trying to figure out how do they fit into this particular section. Perhaps I'm being too neurotically systematic and trying to insist that everything has to fit in. In that case, maybe they originally did fit in here, and it's just my neuroses that I have to deal with. But what I did find, you see, just take a look at the first one. If for just the time of a finger snap, a monk pursues a mind of loving kindness, he is called a monk who is not devoid of jhana, who acts upon the teaching of the teacher, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. How much more than those who cultivate it? And then the next two are just, the only difference is this one develops a mind of loving kindness, this one who attends to a mind of loving kindness. Okay, otherwise there's nothing else in this chapter that corresponds to these suttas. But if we jump down we come to a chapter number 8, or section number 18 here, called Finger Snap. Okay, and it begins, if for just the time of a finger snap, a monk develops the first jhana, he is called a bhikkhu, a monk who is not devoid of jhana, who acts upon the teaching of the teacher, who responds to his advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. How much more then those who cultivate it? And then this same sort of template is applied to the second, to the fourth jhana, liberation of the mind by loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and so on, and a whole multitude of other qualities. So it seems almost as if those three suttas really belong in that later section, and somehow maybe got recited out of place. I don't know, and the original reciters have been dead for 2,500 years or so. So we have no way to check the reason why these suttas are included here. But thematically, they don't seem to fit in very well. Okay, then I want to go to a group of 4 suttas, which can be taken in 2 pairs. Okay, first comes 43 and 44. Okay, these 2 suttas deal with the consequences of a corrupted mind and a placid or clear mind in relation to the rebirth process. Oops. Oh, it's not letting me end. Okay, number 43. Okay, the Buddha says, having encompassed a mentally corrupted person's mind with my own mind, I understand that if this person were to die at this time, he would be deposited in hell as if brought there. For what reason? Because his mind is corrupted. And then the generalization is stated, it is because of mental corruption, the impurity of the mind, that with the breakup of the body after death, some beings, it's not stated as a flat, universal statement, some beings here are reborn in the plane of misery, in a bad destination, in the lower world, in hell. So, there are cases where some people might have mental corruption, but they do sufficient good deeds that they can be reborn in a higher realm. But sort of the underlying principle is that when the mind is strongly conditioned by the mental corruptions, by greed, hatred, delusion, and the secondary defilements, that those mental states will generate the unwholesome karma that will direct beings towards the rebirth in the lower realms. Particularly if those defilements become strong enough to motivate strong, unwholesome karma, deeds of body and speech that will create that unwholesome karma. Okay, then the counterpart is that the Buddha says, having encompassed a mentally placid or a mentally pure person's mind with my own mind. I understand that if this person were to die at this time, he would be deposited in heaven. As if brought there. For what reason? Because his mind is placid or clear or pure. So it is because of mental placidity or mental purity, not the complete purity that comes from the actual eradication of defilements, but a temporary placidity that comes from doing good deeds, wholesome deeds, or the temporary purification through meditation, that with the breakup of the body after death, some beings are reborn in a good destination in a heavenly world, or it could be a good rebirth in the human realm. So again, this shows what I call the constructive role of the citta in constructing the paths that lead to rebirth in the different realms. I put that picture on the board last week. Doesn't hurt to repeat it, it's simple. Okay, so we can say that the unwholesome citta is actually the path leading to the rebirth into the hell realms, the animal realm, and the realm of the pretas, or the afflicted spirits. And the wholesome citta is the path leading to back to the human realm, to the various levels or tiers of the heavenly realms, and to the transcendent realm of Nibbana. But whether it's unwholesome cittas or wholesome cittas, they're both cittas. And so we can say that it's the citta which lies at the base of the entire cycle of birth and death, as well as the transcendent state beyond the cycle of birth and death. And then we see in the next pair of suttas how it's the proper direction of the citta which either keeps one in bondage to the cycle of birth and death, or will lead one to liberation from birth and death. So it starts off with I find it a rather strange simile Of course, the Buddha says, suppose a misdirected spike of hill rice or barley were pressed by the hand or foot, so it is impossible that it would pierce the hand or the foot and draw blood. For what reason? Because the spike is misdirected. I say the simile is strange because it seems this would be a thing that one doesn't want to happen. But in this case, applying the simile, he says it's impossible that a monk with a misdirected mind would pierce ignorance, arouse true knowledge, and realize Nibbana. For what reason? Because the mind, that's the citta, is misdirected. So if one doesn't direct the mind properly, one cannot realize Nibbana. And then a well-directed spike of rice or barley, when pressed, would pierce the hand or the foot and draw blood. And so it is possible that a monk with a well-directed mind would pierce ignorance, arouse true knowledge, and realize Nibbana. For what reason? Because the mind is well-directed. Okay, so the key to gaining the transcendent state, that is, to breaking out from the entire cycle of birth and death, is piercing ignorance and arousing true knowledge. And that comes about through, actually I should just put that here, piercing ignorance, arousing true knowledge, and that comes about by properly directing the citta. Okay, now how does one properly direct the citta? Now if we go back to the sutta that we looked at last week, we saw that the Buddha says that the mind is, by its very nature, it's luminous or bright and radiant, but it is defiled by these, what he calls adventitious defilements. That is, defilements that, so to speak, come from the outside. Defilements that are not intrinsic to the mind. Defilements that are not part of the mind's essential nature. Then the uninstructed worldling does not understand this as it really is. And so for the worldling, there is no development of the mind. But the noble disciple understands this as it really is. And so for the instructed noble disciple, there is development of the mind. And we saw from another sutta that what is meant by these defilements that come from the outside, that cover up the luminosity of the mind, are the 5 mental hindrances. And that brings us to the early suttas in this chapter. Which are on the 5 hindrances. And so we have here 20 suttas. You know, we have 5 hindrances. Does anybody remember what the 5 hindrances are and can state them exactly in the canonical order? If anybody states them out of order, then you can't continue. You have to give way to somebody else. What are the 5 hindrances in the proper canonical order? Do we have the mobile microphone? So So before you start speaking, you have to be sure that you're going to get them in the right order.
Greed, restlessness, and...
No.
Oh, boo. I have to pass it back.
Yeah.
I think it's physical desire, it's sexual desire, then there's aversion, sloth and torpor, restlessness and remorse and doubt.
Okay. Was that Matt?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Okay, very good. Okay, so we have them here. Sensual desire, ill will. Here I translate as dullness and drowsiness. Somehow early translators had used sloth and torpor. Do we use sloth in regular speech? No. Usually I think, previously I'd always thought of sloth as an animal that one sees in the zoo, till some translator, maybe in the 1940s, thought it would be a good idea to render this Buddhist tina as sloth, tina mita, sloth and torpor. Then it caught on. And I remember Joseph Goldstein in the 1970s was using sloth and torpor. Then it caught on amongst the Vipassana meditation teachers, and maybe Nyanamoli also was using it. And I picked it up in my early translations. Then I was thinking, wait a minute. I don't hear people in everyday life speaking about sloth. So then I thought, and then when I'm meditating, when I'm experiencing this, do I think, am I experiencing sloth today? No, what is this? It's dullness. So then I start using dullness. And then we have restlessness and remorse. And the fifth is doubt. Actually, this one is better. It helps. Okay, and then these 20 suttas are arranged in 5 pairs. And so instead of dealing with them in sequence from 11 to 20, we could take them in the 5 pairs. So we have 11, I think it would go this way. 11 and 16, 12 and 17, 13 and 18, 14 and 19, 15 and 20. Okay, so the first we have, the text says, I do not see even one other thing on account of which unarisen sensual desire arises, and arisen sensual desire increases and expands so much as the mark of the attractive. How can I raise the size of this? Can you read it? Okay, I think that's good. Okay, so the first sensual desire and sort of its stimulus, what causes it to arise and then to increase and expand, it's something called supanimitta, the mark or sign of the beautiful, the attractive. And though some people translate this first hindrance as greed or simple desire, but the Pali term, it's, here we don't have the diacritical marks, but it's, I'll do it this way, kama chanda, which is sensual desire. And since it's, we have to remember that the teaching is being given in a monastic context, and so it's referring to, for a monastic person training, the form of sensual desire that becomes most prominent is sexual desire. Of course, there are other kinds of sensual desire that arise, but particularly for a young monastic, it will be sexual desire that arises, that becomes most prominent. And this sensual desire, sort of its stimulus, is the sign or mark of what is attractive. And it will grasp upon the attractive feature of things, and this will connect, well, this statement will connect to the first, in the case of a male, it will connect to the first 5 suttas, where the Buddha says, I do not see even one other form that so obsesses the mind of a man as the form of a woman, and similarly sound, odor, taste, touch. And then in the case of a woman, the same with regard to the form, sound, odor, taste, touch of a man. Okay, so we could see that this sutta, number 11, is sort of referring back to suttas 1 to 10. Okay, so this hindrance of sensual desire arises because one grasps upon the mark or sign of the beautiful, taking the outer sign, particularly, let us just take the example of the man sees the woman's form as being beautiful. Okay, Donald Trump at the beauty pageant. He sees, he's judging, nice thin form, smiley face, everything beautiful. Okay, so to overcome the sensual desire, the method is to prevent the sensual desire from arising. Let's just take the text. The text says, I do not see even one other thing on account of which unarisen sensual desire does not arise, and arisen sensual desire is abandoned, so much as the mark of the unattractive. And in Pali, this is asubha nimitta. And this means learning to focus upon the unbeautiful or unattractive nature of the things one is initially inclined to grasp upon as beautiful and attractive. And specifically, the asubha nimitta refers to a particular method of meditative practice which involves taking the physical body, and generally one doesn't start by taking the body of the person one thinks is beautiful and attractive. Of course, in that case, if one starts by choosing Miss Universe, then one is going to be thinking, oh, I'm going to see her as unattractive. The mind will be focusing on nice hair, nice smile, nice breasts, nice hips, nice legs, and gone is the sign of the mark of the unattractive. But one takes one's own body and one starts investigating the nature of this body using the primary method is examining the body in terms of the 32 constituents of the body. I introduced this meditation during the summer. We had a whole day to practice it. So examining the body in terms of the hairs of the head, body hairs, fingernails, teeth, skin, and then going beneath the skin, taking the flesh, bones, sinews, bone marrow, kidneys, the various organs, tissues, fluids of the body, until one sees the body that one takes to be so attractive as being composed of all of these constituents. And then when one gets a very deep and clear perception of the body as composed of these parts, then one can start projecting it onto other bodies. And then the tendency for lust to arise, that will gradually subside. Okay, so this is sort of the direct antidote to overcoming sensual desire. Another method for developing the the sign of the unattractive, it's called the cemetery meditations, or cremation ground meditations. They're difficult to practice these days. But in the Buddha's time, often they would take bodies and bring them to the charnel ground and just discard them there, and then the bodies would undergo stages of decay. And so monks would go to the charnel ground and observe the body in a state of decay, and then go back and meditate that this body is of the same nature. Okay, so the mark of the unattractive is the means of overcoming sensual desire. The next hindrance is ill will. This can be taken as a synonymous with hatred or aversion. It's somewhat more persistent than anger. Anger is something that can flare up, but it doesn't necessarily congeal into ill will. Ill will is more, we could say that ill will represents a more persistent form of anger. And the direct antidote to ill will is the liberation of the mind. By loving kindness. And loving kindness, of course, is metta. So this is the You see, I'm getting angry, but I don't have ill with the computer, but I don't have ill will towards it. Now I'm getting now my anger is turning into ill will. Okay. Okay, good. Good boy. Okay, so to overcome ill will, well, the ill will is really fully overcome when one achieves the liberation of the mind by loving kindness. That represents the actual achievement of jhana, or absorption through loving kindness. But in the initial stages, one has to systematically and methodically, step by step, cultivate the meditation of loving kindness, working in the prescribed way by developing loving kindness, first towards oneself, then taking the persons in the prescribed order. Generally, the way I prefer to do it is with first a dear and respected person, then a very close person, then what we call the mere acquaintance or a neutral person, then a somewhat hostile person, not taking a really hated person initially, and then expanding the range of loving kindness in geographical regions until one can develop loving kindness towards the whole world. Okay, so when one succeeds in even developing a strong base of loving kindness, even if it doesn't reach the level of jhana, but if one just regularly practices the meditation on loving kindness, then it will help to prevent ill will, bitterness, aversion, hostility from arising. Well, it will abandon ill will and aversion whenever they arise, and it will prevent them from arising in the future. And there are many other benefits to developing loving kindness. One becomes dear to other people. One will win the affection whenever one goes into a group. The people will like you. You will sleep easily, wake up happily, and so forth. Okay, the third hindrance or obstacle of the mind is dullness and drowsiness. These are actually two states which are a little bit different, but they're joined together because they have a common feature of, I would call the common feature the sinking of the mind, or inertia of the mind. Sometimes the word rendered as dullness is translated not only as sloth, but as laziness. I think that's not correct, because dullness and drowsiness don't arise only when one is being lazy. They can arise when one is being very energetic, or to people who are being very energetic. I found this. You sit down, say for meditation, one went with strong determination, very resolute, and you sit there, you're not lazy at all, but just this kind of blankness comes over the mind. It's a little bit, I compare this, a little bit like the gray sky of the kind of weather that we have today. So not with the rain, but when you might have a beautiful clear day, bright blue sky, shining sun, and then suddenly a mass of clouds come in, not rain clouds, but just this dull, heavy clouds hanging over the sky. Not the thick black clouds, but these dull, gray clouds, and they just hang there, covering up the whole sky. That is like tina, dullness in my in my understanding. So it's just like the mind becomes dull and just doesn't really function efficiently. And when that happens, then there's the tendency for drowsiness to set in. Because the mind, when it doesn't function efficiently, one keeps on trying, and then drowsiness sets in. And so even though one might have had a good sleep, so the drowsiness here is not the natural sleepiness that will come in, say, at one's regular time to sleep, 10 p.m. or so, but this is like middle of the morning, when one should be fully active, but somehow the drowsiness comes in. So this is unnatural drowsiness, because the mind is inefficient. Okay, so this is dullness and drowsiness. And so the antidote to this, offered by the text, is called the threefold element of energy, or the three aspects of energy. The element of instigation, persistence, and exertion. These are three stages in the unfolding of energy. And the three begin with instigation, or the arousal of energy. And the texts give various methods of arousing energy. Along with the announcement of today's class, I sent a booklet which explains the method. It's called The 5 Mental Hindrances, and from the commentary, explains various methods for overcoming the 5 hindrances. For overcoming dullness and drowsiness, I would say that there are various methods are recommended, but I found, in my own experience, 2 methods to be especially useful. One is called the perception of light, which is doing a short meditation on a bright light. Don't stare at the sun, though, because that could damage the retina of the eye. But one could just briefly look at the sun, just for a few seconds, or at the full moon if it's a full moon night, or at an electric light or a candle light, just to get a perception of light, and then visualize the light. And sometimes that perception of light will stir up the mind, will activate and energize the mind. And the other method is to do a medium or fast-paced walking meditation, for 20, 30 minutes, because then one has to be active, and that will activate the mind. Not the very slow, phase-by-phase walking meditation. Because if you do that, you sometimes will stumble and fall, or think, this isn't going to work. Another method also is to just go, if you have water available, and get cold water and rub it over the face, the back of the head, and that will stimulate you. Okay, I want to go finish all 5 of them. So we've come to the third, then the fourth is restlessness and remorse. Again, these are 2 separate factors which are united because they have the common aspect of agitating the mind. And then the antidote to that, as stated in the text, is simply, the text simply says pacification of the mind, which, as stated, doesn't seem to be very helpful. But what is often recommended by the teachers and by the commentaries is a meditation subject that helps to calm the mind. What I found very helpful myself in calming the restless mind, and maybe because I'm partly a saddha charita, that is one who has a temperament governed by faith, I found meditation on the qualities of the Buddha to be helpful in calming the mind when it's restless. Or meditating on an image of the Buddha, which helps to inspire tranquility, confidence, and trust. What's also recommended, maybe for more intellectualized types, is meditation on the mindfulness of breathing, because the breath can help to tranquilize the mind. So you just be aware of the breath coming in and out, or else one could do a full awareness, maybe a global awareness of the body. Just be fully aware of the body in the sitting posture, not attending to anything specific in the body, but just aware of the body existing in space in the sitting posture, and let whatever arises in the mind, let it go its own way, and just come back, body sitting, body sitting, body sitting, and then the restlessness will gradually subside. Okay, and in the fifth of the hindrances is doubt. And the antidote to doubt that's given here is careful attention. And this is yoniso. Manasikara. And what's interesting, this sutta simply says that arisen doubt is abandoned by careful attention, by yoniso manasikara. But I've looked up another sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. This is Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 46, sutta number 55, which speaks about the overcoming of doubt as the hindrance. And that sutta says that what is needed to overcome doubt is yoniso manasikara, careful attention to things that are wholesome and unwholesome, blamable and blameless, inferior and superior to dark and bright counterparts. So in other words, this is doubt not about the fundamental principles about the Buddha's teaching. It's not doubt about the Four Noble Truths, about impermanence, suffering, non-self, not doubt about dependent origination, but this is the doubt about qualities that might be obstacles to the attainment of samadhi, concentration. So what's needed to clear up this doubt is an understanding of what are the states that are the obstacles to samadhi. What are the states that are that are beneficial to samadhi? How does one practice to eliminate the obstacles to samadhi? How does one practice to strengthen the states beneficial to samadhi? Okay, so that should take us through the section on citta. We have some time now for maybe 15 minutes for questions. 10, 15 minutes for questions. So please feel welcome to ask anything that came up today. Please feel welcome. Mano Pubangama Dhamma. Yeah. I don't think it's on.
Thank you, Bhante. Could you please elaborate about the doubt again? I didn't catch what you said about what exactly doubt meant. I assumed it meant doubt about the fundamentals of Buddhism and the Four Noble Truths, but you said it's not really that.
No, I don't think in this context that the doubt is doubt about the fundamental principles of the Buddha Dharma. Because this is, we have here the context here is the 5 hindrances. And the 5 hindrances are to be overcome in order to gain the jhana or samadhi. And so, to gain samadhi or jhana, one doesn't have to have the deep understanding of the Four Noble Truths, the 3 characteristics, dependent origination. But one has to know what are the states, what are the states that are obstacles to samadhi? What are the states that are beneficial to samadhi? And if one has doubts or uncertainty about that, that will be an obstacle.
So,
yeah, and so one who is practicing can overcome this doubt and then can gain the jhana, but is not yet free from doubts about the principles of what I call the fundamentals of the Buddha's teaching. That comes only with the development of insight, the achievement of panya, wisdom, and then with the eradication of doubt by the first stage of realization, stream entry.
thank you.
Annie?
Bhante, you were speaking before about the animals, all different kinds of animals, and the karma related to each one.
Yeah.
What is it exactly that, I don't know if you could even answer this, that plugs the karma into that individual, the body, like ours? Like, what is the karma plugging into this physical body that then like manifests itself, and then when this body dies, continues on? Like, what is that attachment? What is it attaching to that keeps my karma attached to this body for this lifetime?
Yeah.
Like, so like tomorrow I don't wake up as something else. It's hard to explain. Like, yeah, what is my karma plugging into in this
Okay, I think I understand the question.
material form
Yeah.
that sticks to me until this material form stops existing?
Yeah, I think I understand.
And moves on.
Yeah. That question would probably be answered within the Abhidhamma framework rather than the Sutta framework. And within that framework, what I would say is that there is the karma produces the materiality of the body, and the karma generates the lifespan with a particular, let's say the karma determines the lifespan to be of a particular length, so that when one is born, the karma, when it is determined by karma to have a lifespan of a particular length, so there's the it's called the Janaka karma, the karma that produces rebirth, determines one's lifespan to be of a particular length, and that karma will go on producing new material phenomena throughout the length of the lifespan, over and over, until that karmic force becomes exhausted, and then the lifespan comes to an end.
So there's not like a force of karma that attaches to something that is going to become conceived. It's not attaching. It's not attaching to something that like finds. It's not finding something that's going to be conceived. It's actually creating. It's the conception. I don't know how I can explain it. The karma is creating the conception of something. It's not like looking for something to attach to.
I'd say if you speak of the karma looking for something to attach
Like
to
a
it,
baby, like for instance, like maybe for an example, like a baby that's going to be conceived. I remember you saying that there were three conditions.
Yeah.
And one of them being that karmic force needs to be there. So is it the karma waiting for those other two things to occur to attach to it?
I see.
Or is the karma creating that? Like, is that the first component? That's the force?
No, I would say, this is my understanding, that, okay, a person dies, and they have certain like karmic predispositions, say to come back into the human realm, but the conditions in the human realm are not yet ripe, though the couple that would be the appropriate parents for that person have not yet had sexual relations, all of the situation is not yet ready, so that the karmic force of the being who's died, you could speak about it metaphorically, sort of hovering around, waiting for the right conditions to manifest. Then when the right conditions manifest, then that karmic force will sort of attach itself to the embryo.
Yeah.
When the embryo arises in the womb, the mother's womb.
Then, from that point, what is it actually attaching to that keeps it that person
then
for
that karmic stream of the being that's deceased then becomes the stream of consciousness of the new being.
And that consciousness is kind of like it's a material, like a physical form of the brain.
No, the stream of consciousness is consciousness, or it's the bhavanga consciousness, the rebirth consciousness followed by the bhavanga, but it links to the material of the ovum, the fertilized egg, which then becomes the karmically produced materiality of the new being. And then that karmically produced materiality, karmically produced matter of the new being keeps on reproducing itself throughout the life as determined by the karma of the being who's taken rebirth. And that continues through the rest of the life until the karma that determines the lifespan is exhausted. Then that comes to an end.
So it's the consciousness that is the glue, sort of, that keeps that
the karma,
baby,
you could say, is the propelling force.
Okay, and that keeps the baby knowing it's that same, those experiences are accumulating in that one body.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. That's
But there can be something called the destructive karma, which comes across and then interrupts and cuts off the reproductive karma of that being, so that the lifespan comes to an end prematurely, and the reproductive karma doesn't get the chance to work out the full lifespan, or to continue through the full lifespan.
Materialize it,
it doesn't get the chance to fully materialize.
I understand. Okay, thank you.
Yes, please.
Hi.
What is your name?
Tiffany.
You're Tiffany.
Yeah, Tiffany
okay.
Joe. Yeah, thank you, Bhante. I have similar question, but from different point of view. For the realm, hell realm, animal realms, if you look at our world, there are some animals, they live very comfortable life.
Yeah.
They have animal hospital, animal daycare
Yeah.
center. And if you look at the human realm, there are human,
Yeah.
behave like animals, and they live very poor. So basically, how do we define? It seems like no clear definition to the realm,
Yeah.
and also to just ourselves, say one person, if we did something very bad, we
Yeah.
feel like, oh, I'm in hell. Then if we did something very good, we say, oh, I'm in heaven.
Yeah.
So basically, is that the mind state in different realm,
Yeah.
and our mind is traverse different realms
Yeah.
in each day.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we also traverse to the Buddha's state, right?
We transfer to what?
The mind,
Yeah.
because we reach animal realm, we're probably in heaven or in hell. We're probably in Buddha's realm somewhat, right?
Yeah.
In the mind, maybe traverse. So,
Okay, first the question, animals. Yeah, some animals live very comfortable lives, whereas many humans live miserable lives, but still on the basis of, you could say, the potentials within each realm, the animal realm is still considered an unfortunate destination because the animal doesn't have really a potential to develop to higher levels of consciousness, whereas the human realm is considered still a fortunate realm because humans, even though they meet with a lot of suffering, but they still have the potential to develop to higher levels. That potential is always there. The moral consciousness is there, even though it's often sort of overwhelmed by misery. Okay, so that's the answer to one question. Then to the other question, are these different realms, are they just sort of metaphors for states of mind? You could say states of mind, you could say give us insights into the different realms of existence. But early Buddhism, it doesn't regard the different realms as just metaphors for states of mind. But the different realms are really objective realms of existence.
okay. And another question is actually for practitioners,
Yeah.
like people, the Nibbana is for Arhat or for Buddha's realm.
Yeah.
This Nibbana
Yeah.
is, how about the practitioners? Are they in the heavens realm, or there are some realms like between heavens and Nibbana?
Well, practitioners practice in the human and heavenly realms until when they reach like complete realization, then they attain Nibbana.
Okay.
Then they're outside. When they reach Nibbana, then they are beyond or outside the realm of repeated birth and death. Okay, we'll have to stop now for the lunch. And we won't have a discussion period today because we have the Buddhist Association, we have a board meeting at 2 o'clock, and I'm going to need a little rest period after the class. Is there anybody here who's coming from New Rochelle or near New Rochelle? You're coming by car? Would you be willing I got an email from somebody during the week who lives in New Rochelle. He's interested in coming to the class. So could I put you in contact with him? I think you gave me your email earlier, but if you write it again, then I'll have it. If you could just write it here. Okay, so let us end with the sharing of the merits. And next week we won't have the class because I have to go to St. Louis. And next week, today's the 22nd, so next week is the 29th, right? So again, I have to plug the BGR Walk to Feed the Hungry. Please, everybody, if you're free that Saturday, come for our Walk to Feed the Hungry, a great way to put compassion into action. If you belong to any other Dharma center, temple, or have connections to them, or any community center, take a poster, a little poster, or cards and distribute widely so you can get hundreds or dozens or even 100 people to come. And you'll find them all here. Sandy has a box of cards and posters. Anything else to distribute? Just cards and posters. A few. Oh, those are letters of appeal. Okay. Excuse me? Am I? Excuse me? Well, you see, over the last 4 years, I've walked in New York Walk, but we have walks all around the United States, and people in St. Louis, each year they've been writing to me and say, please come to join our St. Louis Walk, please come, please come. So this year I said, okay, I'll come to join the St. Louis Walk. And it turned out that the St. Louis Walk and the New York Walk are on the same weekend. And since I'm such a poor meditative practitioner, I haven't developed yet the ability to be in two places at the same time. If I develop that ability in the course of this week, I'll be at the New York Walk and the St. Louis Walk over the same weekend. But if things go along as slowly as they've been going the last 40 years, it's likely that I'll just have to be at the St. Louis Walk. But I'll have spies telling me who was at the New York Walk and who ducked out thinking Bhante's not here, he won't see. Okay, so let us end with sharing the merits. Okay, so please everybody, really from the depths of my heart, I really urge you to go for the New York Walk at the Riverside Park. That's around 79th Street, 80th Street, and Riverside Drive in Upper Manhattan. Okay, so we share the merits with the Devas, Bhutas. Akasata chabumata deva nagamahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva nagamahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata deva nagamahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Bhavagupadaya avici hetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha sanya sanyino dukkha pamuchantu pusantu nibuting. And also I have to add a further word about walks. Well, we have the next class, the next Anguttara Nikaya class will be November. Since I'm not here next week, we don't have a class next week, so the next class is November 5th, correct? That's Saturday, November 5th. Then people living in this part of New York State or in Connecticut, we have another BGR walk in Upper Connecticut. Allison is here, right? You want to stand up? so people see who you are. So Allison is the organizer of